everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. My name's Alice and today I'm going to be doing the Modern Classics book tag. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm very pleased to be doing the Modern Classics tag. I was very kindly tagged for this by Ray over at Ray of Sunlight. I will link her channel in the description box down below, so please do go and check it out. This tag is originally by Milena Reads, and I will also be tagging her original tag video in the description below. There are 10 questions today, and the first question is, what is the definition of a modern classic to you? I found this to be a very difficult question. I wouldn't describe myself as a person who has read very many classics or modern classics, particularly modern classics, up until recently when I took part in the 1900 to 1950 readathon. The definition to me of a classic, first of all, I think to be a classic, a book needs to have some kind of endurance or longevity. A lot of classics may very well be very much of their time, but there's always something that we can get from them now that we can all interpret differently in the way we read them. I'm certainly no expert, but I really liked this quote that I found from Italo Calvino, which says, "A classic is a book which has never exhausted all it has to say to its readers." And that struck me as exactly what I think a classic has to be. I think a modern classic basically does that same job, but is more modern. Where do I think the cutoff is between classics and modern classics? And the answer is I actually don't know where the cutoff is. I'd always probably considered, if I'd considered it at all, that modern classics were probably classics from the 20th century. But I do understand that a lot of people would consider it to be classics written after the war. It's not something that I've ever especially put a huge amount of thought into, but thinking about it now, let's go with books from after the First World War, roughly speaking. What I consider to be a really good book to meet my definition of classic would be a book that makes me think and that I continue to think about after it's finished. I've read in my life an awful lot of sort of throwaway fiction, crime fiction and contemporary that even a few years later I don't remember it, I haven't thought about it since. So for me, a classic should have some sort of impact on me, make me think about something, maybe in a different way. I don't know. Let's move on to question 2. What is your favourite subgenre? Gothic, romantic, historical, fiction, political, etc. If you've been watching my channel before, you may already know that I'm a huge fan of classic crime. However, I don't personally see classic crime as part of the modern classic genre. Don't know why this is, and in thinking about my answers for this video, I feel that this is a topic that is probably highly debatable. My favourite author, for example, is probably Agatha Christie, but I don't think she's ever mentioned in any lists of modern classics, even though her books are from what is considered the golden age of crime, and some of her books, her very best books, should, if they are not already, should definitely be considered masterpieces. But in my mind, classic crime has always been a separate genre and not part of the modern classic genre. I don't know why I think that. I don't know if other people think that, or could let me know what they think in the comments down below. If we're saying that classic crime is not a subgenre of modern classics, then I would probably choose the gothic horror genre or the dystopian genre. Which leads me nicely on to an author from the 20th century whose books I would recommend. If I can't have Agatha Christie as an author to recommend, and by the way, I do recommend her highly, however, I realise I've kind of talked myself out of putting classic crime within modern classics. So therefore, the author that I would recommend from the 20th century is Shirley Jackson. I haven't read everything by Shirley Jackson, but I highly, highly recommend The Haunting of Hill House. It's such a strange book, It's very masterful in its use of suspense. Shirley Jackson calls into question everything that you already believe about horror and haunted houses in this book. I've also read her book We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which is interesting in a different way, but again deals with sort of themes of, I suppose, mental stability, psychology, and just general horror. I've also read her short story The Lottery, which is thought to be one of the best short stories of all time, and I would recommend that if you're interested in reading a very good short story. Question number 4 is your favourite modern classic so far this year. In the month of May, I participated in the 1900 to 1950 readathon, so I definitely got a few more modern classics read. So my favourite from this year was actually Animal Farm by George Orwell, because I just found it really interesting from start to finish. I enjoyed the presentation of revolution and propaganda. I enjoyed the writing style. I enjoyed the narration on the audiobook. So that's been my favourite so far this year. Question 5, a modern classic that surprised you. For this one, I'm going to choose from my classic shelf, and it is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. The reason this surprised me is because I think when I first decided to read this book, I hadn't quite realised that it was non-fiction. I was going into it thinking that I was going to be reading fiction. I just found the way this is written so interesting, and it so vividly brings to life a real shocking event. I think it's all the more startling for the fact that it's really true, and I wouldn't say that I enjoyed it immensely. It has got some very horrible content, but as a book that surprised me, I definitely am glad I read it, and it's very, very gripping. Number 6 is a modern classic that was disappointing. I'm sure a lot of you are going to tell me that I'm wrong, and that's fine, but my modern classic that was disappointing I also read this year, and I've also talked about in other videos, and it was 1984 by George Orwell. The reason I've chosen 1984 is because I think my expectations of this book were probably a little bit too high. So I'd never read it before this year, and I feel like this book is hyped and hyped and hyped as like the dystopia. And the reason it was disappointing for me is because I really enjoy dystopia, and I was so expecting to enjoy 1984. I just felt really let down. In terms of pace, it really, really dragged. I felt like certain sections were repeated and repeated in different ways throughout the book. I was disappointed. Which brings me on to question 7. A modern classic you want to reread. For years now, I've been saying that this is my favourite book of all time, and that book is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. The reason why A Clockwork Orange is probably my favourite book of all time is the language. I did a linguistics degree, and I've always been somewhat obsessed with language. Language just really interests me, and the language of this book drew me in straight away because it's told in this alternative slang and told by the protagonist Alex. I just absolutely loved getting into this language, realising what each word meant, and I just absolutely love what Anthony Burgess did in this book, writing it in such an interesting way with such interesting use of language. That for me is why this is my favourite book of all time, potentially. That's also the reason why I really want to reread A Clockwork Orange, because I've actually only read it once, and for something that I've gone around saying is my favourite for at least the past decade, I feel I really need to revisit it and see if I still love it. I found the dystopia and the use of a new language in this so much better than the dystopia and the use of language in 1984, which might have been another reason why I found that book disappointing. So yeah, I don't know if Clockwork Orange was actually the start of my obsession with dystopia, but I really do love this book, and I definitely want to read it again. Another unusual book that I think I would consider a modern classic, and it does It does say on this edition that it's a Harper Perennial Modern Classic, so I'm going with it. It's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This is such a absolutely crazy and outrageous book, and I definitely will reread it one day. But this is definitely a book that is just so original, but it's absolutely mad and it's very, very twisted. I will read it again one day. Right, question 8. A recent release that you think will be a modern classic in a few decades. Now for me, this really depends on where you cut off modern classics. I personally wouldn't give that title to anything after 2000 because I don't know that they've been around for long enough to be a classic as yet. I don't know about the 90s, and with that in mind, something that I definitely hope and think will be a modern classic, perhaps it already is Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy. I actually read Northern Lights when I was younger and didn't read the rest of the trilogy for no apparent reason, so a couple of years ago I finally took the plunge and read The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass, and I wished I had read them so much sooner. They are just wonderful books, and for me these books give you so much more than just a regular book, and for me they will easily become classics if they're not considered classics already. I think they're brilliant. I'm looking forward to reading the Book of Dust trilogy as well, which I haven't started yet. Thinking about this question, 2 more books came to mind that I've read in the past year, and I don't know if anyone would agree with me on these, but for me these are books that meet my criteria of an amazing book by being books that you go away and think about and can't stop thinking about. And I read both of these books in sort of August, September time of last year, and I still think about them. They are just really, really good books, and I have spoken about them in more depth in my video about books that I loved in 2020, and they are Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. This book encompasses a time period of history, including the First World War, including the Second World War, quite heavily, and it follows someone through their life, but it follows someone through their life multiple times with multiple different lives playing out. And without any spoilers, I can't tell you much more than that, but it is just a wonderful, wonderful book, and it does something completely different. It represents those historical eras accurately, but also reflects on them from a modern point of view, I suppose. I think Life After Life has the potential to be a modern classic. I also think The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I think The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak because it again deals with an era in history. It deals with the Second World War, and this time it deals with it from the point of view of a child living in Nazi Germany, and it's told from the point of view of death. I think I've thought about The Book Thief more in the past just under a year since I read it than I've possibly ever thought about any other book. It just is such a sad book, and to me, again, it brings something new to fiction. The Book Thief brought home to me not only how futile and awful the Second World War was, and war is in general for everybody involved, it also brought home to me how important literature can be and literacy can be to children. It's a fantastic book. I think it has the potential to be a modern classic in years to come. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think. I had to think long and hard about this question. What would be books that you think will be modern classics in years to come? Let me know, and also let me know what do you think of my 3 choices. Anyway, on to question 9. The next modern classic on your TBR. I've got a few choices here. They're all on my sort of classics, crime classics and modern classic shelf here behind me. So 3 potentials for my next modern classic would be either The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. This is another very hefty tome that I have asked for as a present and then never read. I definitely want to get to read it. I also might read Slaughterhouse-Five. This book is my husband's. He's already read it and I have never read it. I've seen mixed opinions and feelings on this, but I always enjoy time travelling elements of books. I always enjoy apocalyptic elements in books, so I really want to read Slaughterhouse-Five and see what I think. Even more likely to be my next modern classic is yet another book that I asked for as a present and didn't read yet, which is Don't Look Now and Other Stories by Daphne du Maurier. I'm highly intrigued by Daphne du Maurier and her short stories. I think probably the only one of her short stories that I've actually read in the past is The Birds, and I haven't read any of her others. The title story has a very famous film about it, and I have seen that. It's very disturbing, so I really want to read du Maurier's short stories for myself and see how disturbing they are, and I'm sure I'm not going to be disappointed by this one. So this is definitely one that I have my eye on as my next possible modern classic. Okay, we've reached the end of the tag. All that remains is for me to tag 3 more classics lovers. I would like to tag anybody who watches this video who's interested in taking part. I'm going to tag Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot, who I know is working her way through a very long list of books which I'm certain will have a lot of modern classics in it. I would like to tag Julie from Hungry Bookworm. I know she's a big Agatha Christie fan as well, so I would love to hear her point of view on how classic crime fits into modern classics. As I say, anyone who's interested, please do let me know if you make a video on this. I'd love to see your responses to this tag. That's all from me today. Thank you for watching my video all about the Modern Classics book tag. I hope you will give it a like if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and you're enjoying my content. I hope you'll join me again soon for another video all about books on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.